Alright, so what you're seeing right now is probably the cheapest prime lens I've ever reviewed on this channel. This is the brand new TTArtisan 50mm f1.8 Neo lens, which Per Gear kindly sent me for free in exchange of making this video. And the price for this lens is only $89. And honestly, for this price, I think the performance of this lens is absolutely fantastic when it comes to overall image quality, ergonomics, and also autofocus performance, as you will see throughout this video. So first of all, starting with the design of this lens is very minimal. The build quality is plastic, obviously because it is extremely cheap, but it is very compact and lightweight, perfect for something like the Sony ZV-E1 weighing just 155 grams. Obviously not gonna get for this price any weather sealing, but you get a lens cap with a USB-C port for firmware updates to make the performance of this lens a bit better. And in terms of like features, it is pretty much bare bones. You don't get an autofocus manual focus switch, no custom function button, no aperture ring, and also no focus ring, which is something I've never seen before. So you can only use this lens with autofocus. You cannot do manual focus with this lens, at least on the lens itself. You can kind of like set the focus point to an area and then disable the autofocus, and that will lock the focus basically, but you cannot control the focus from the lens itself. And now when it comes to autofocus performance, initially when I tested this lens with my Sony ZV-E1 with the default autofocus speed settings, it was a little bit slow when it comes to like tracking a subject. It was not pulsing or hunting or jumping. It was just a bit slower than usual. So what I did is I went to the menu, increased the autofocus speed, and it was just as good pretty much as any other lens I've reviewed in the past. Obviously not as good as a native Sony lens, but for a lens that is only $89, it is perfect in my personal opinion. I even tried backlighting myself and so on, and didn't get any sort of like issues when it comes to autofocus. No pulsing, no hunting, no jumping or anything like that. It was tracking myself really reliably without any issues. Now when it comes to focus breathing, it is okay, nothing exceptional, but of course you cannot really do focus stacking with this lens because you don't get focus ring, and also you can't really do focus pulling shots because again you don't get focus ring. But overall, when it comes to like focus breathing performance, I think it performs fairly well, if you will. And now when it comes to like image quality performance, honestly when I got this lens I was not expecting too much, and honestly I think it performs really well. As you can see from this footage that I shot with this lens and my Sony ZV-E1, it is sharp, looks pretty good, again considering the price point of only $89. So obviously it's not going to compete with something like G Master lenses or other expensive Sigma or Tamron lenses, but for the price point of only $89, I think the image quality performance is fantastic. Alright, so first of all, let's start with overall sharpness performance. This is 1.8, f2.8, f4, and f5.6. Let's zoom in. And honestly, in the center at f1.8, the sharpness performance is really good in my personal opinion. At f2.8, it improves slightly, but then at f4, it becomes definitely better, and at f5.6, it is really sharp compared to like f1.8. If I'm gonna go to the top center, at f1.8 it is a bit soft, f2.8 it is significantly sharper, and then as you can see at f4 it performs much better than f1.8 and also f2.8. Let's go to the bottom center. Again, same thing in here, f1.8 slightly soft, f2.8 sharper, and then f4 significantly sharper, and f5.6 it is extremely sharp. Now let's go to the corner, and here we'll see a significant difference. As you can see, you get some artifacts at f1.8 and also f2.8, and this completely disappears at f4, and then the difference between f4 and f5.6 is not that significant in my opinion. Let's go to the lower right bottom corner. Same thing, you get like smudginess on f1.8 and f2.8, and then at f4 it becomes significantly sharper. At f5.6 obviously it is even sharper than at f4. Now let me zoom out so you can see the entire image basically. And now here is the image at f1.8 by itself, and here you can clearly see the artifacts you get in the corners of the frame, in the sides of the frame. Like it is really sharp honestly in the center of the frame, but then on the sides it becomes significantly softer when shooting wide open, which is definitely one of the biggest downsides of this lens. But honestly, again, for the price of just $89, you can't really expect anything better than this. Now let's take a look at chromatic aberration. I'm going to zoom in. f1.8, as you can see, you get significant fringing. f2.8, it becomes better. f4, you can still see it, but it is definitely much better than f1.8. And then at f5.6, it is pretty much non-existent. And let me just zoom to fit in here so you can see if it is visible when you like previewing the shots normally. And as you can see at f1.8, I can definitely spot the fringing even when the image is completely zoomed out. But at f2.8, it is barely visible, if I'm honest. At f4 and 5.6, it is almost identical. So I would say if you want to reduce aberrations as much as possible, chromatic aberrations, shoot it at a f2.8 and above. Now this is Bokeh performance. Let me just zoom out so you can see what's going on in here. And you definitely get some green fringing at f1.8 in here, and also at f2.8, this nasty green fringing, as you can see. And then at f4, it completely disappears, and at f5.6, it is significantly cleaner. And now, flare and sunstars. Honestly, I was really impressed when I saw these images, especially at f1.8, because I have reviewed TTArtisan lens in the past, the 40mm f2, which is more expensive than this. I think it's like $170, and the flare performance of that lens is really bad, significantly worse than this when shooting wide open at f2. And in here you get such clean performance when it comes to like haziness, ghosting, and flares. There is barely any difference when it comes to like hazing, ghosting from like f1.8 and f4. I mean, you do get more contrast with like f4, but it is not the same difference as with the TTArtisan 40mm f2 lens, which is incredible again, considering the low price point of this lens in here. So flare performance is honestly incredible. I can't really say anything negative. And then the sunstars start appearing at about f4, as you can see, more prominent at f5.6. And here I got a couple of comparisons at f8, 11, 13, and 16. And the sunstars do look nice, but it's nothing exceptional like the TTArtisan 75mm f2. That lens has really great sunstars if you are after good sunstars, like creative sunstars, if you will. All right, now let's take a look at some bokeh and background blur performance. As you can see, I took a picture of this light in here. And first of all, let's take a look at the sharpness again with something more realistic. And in here, you can barely honestly spot a difference between like f1.8 and f4. I mean, there is a difference in terms of like overall bite, but it is honestly barely noticeable. And here is the bokeh. I'm not honestly like a bokeh expert, if you will, but I would definitely consider this lens as like a vintage lens in a way. It definitely has the vintage character, as pretty much all TTArtisan lenses, if I'm honest. But the bokeh is nothing like special, but it is not terrible at the same time. Here is another sample shot with like bokeh. Here maybe you'll be able to see the difference a bit better. Not too bad for just $89. And here again, you can see like the sharpness performance. I mean, when you set the focus, like the sharpness on the subject is going to be really great with this lens. It's just that you'll get this, you see this softness and mushiness around the corners or around the subject. I mean, maybe you like this because this is kind of like a character, but it is definitely something worth considering. You get this, like, you see smudginess around the subject, which pretty much goes away like f4, like I said, as you can see. At f4, it looks more natural, and here you get this kind of like a soft smudginess, if you will. And then finally, this is the minimum focus distance performance at like f1.8, f2.8, f4, and 5.6. And like I said, the sharpness at the minimum focus distance wide open is exceptional. I've seen lenses that are more expensive than this and have worse sharpness performance when shooting at the minimum focus distance wide open. There is barely any difference between f1.8 and f2.8 at the minimum focus distance. So to summarize, I think for the price of only $89, this lens is exceptional. The image quality is fantastic, obviously not as good as like a G Master lens, but overall for just $89, I think the image quality is great. The autofocus performance is also extremely good in my personal opinion. It was tracking me fairly reliably with no hunting, pulsing, or jumping issues. And yes, you don't get like a focus ring to manually control the focus, but honestly, if you're going to use this lens to just film yourself, yourself like I'm doing right now, you're anyways going to use autofocus, and in that regard it performs really well in my opinion. So if you are interested, I'm going to leave some links down below, and of course if you have any questions, comments or recommendations, also leave them down below, and I guess I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.